Have you ever considered a fortune so vast it defies the very limits of imagination? A mind so brilliant it could solve any riddle, and a kingdom that stretched to the horizon, a realm of unparalleled peace and prosperity. This is no mere fairy tale. It is the true, breathtaking chronicle of one of the most mesmerizing, complex, and ultimately tragic figures in all of human history, King Solomon. On our channel today, we invite you to embark on an extraordinary journey back through the mists of time. Together, we will peel back the gilded layers of legend and myth to reveal the man whose name has echoed through 3 millennia. Solomon, a name that has become synonymous with divine wisdom, but also a name that is inextricably linked to the most profound and heartbreaking of human frailties. How could a man so frighteningly wise, a mind touched by God himself, stumble and fall into such catastrophic errors? How could a soul so uniquely blessed be drawn into the abyss of faithlessness, squandering the very divine grace that had made him legendary? The story you think you know is only the beginning. The truth of his rise and fall holds a powerful, unexpected lesson for us all, even today. Before we dive into this epic saga, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel across the globe. Now settle in as we uncover the monumental life of King Solomon. In the grand tapestry of human history, few threads are woven with as much brilliance and complexity as that of Solomon, the third king of a united Israel. His reign is remembered as the absolute zenith, the most glorious and incandescent golden age in the history of his nation. It was an era of unprecedented peace, a time when wealth flowed like a river and the wisdom of its king was a marvel to the known world. But as we know, the brightest light often casts the darkest shadow. Behind the blinding shimmer of Solomon's throne, there lies a somber, cautionary tale, a story not just of a great king, but of the universal struggle between human weakness and the enduring grace of God. To truly understand Solomon, our story cannot begin with him. It must begin with his father, the legendary warrior poet King David. Picture the scene. Israel is finally a unified kingdom. Its enemies have been subdued, crushed. Under the weight of David's military genius and strategic prowess, the blessings of God seem to rest upon the land like a comforting mantle. Peace has been won, but it has been won through blood and strife. And even in this moment of triumph, in the hallowed halls of the royal palace in Jerusalem, the dark clouds of future tragedy were already beginning to gather on the horizon. Solomon's life began not in simplicity, but in scandal and divine intervention. He was born into the highest echelons of royalty, the son of King David and Bathsheba. Yes, that Bathsheba, the woman whose own story with David began with an act of profound adultery and a subsequent calculated murder, a scandal that rocked the foundations of the kingdom and brought God's judgment upon David's house. Yet from this deeply flawed and sinful beginning, a story of redemption was about to unfold. For God, in his inscrutable sovereignty, had a specific and magnificent plan for this child. Even before his birth, God declared through the prophet Nathan that this son would not be a man of war like his father. He would be a man of peace. His very name, Solomon, or Shlomo in Hebrew, is derived from the word shalom, meaning peace. It was a destiny, a promise woven into the very fabric of his identity from his first breath. But destiny, even when divinely ordained, is rarely a path of ease. The road that would lead Solomon to the throne was not a grand, clear avenue. It was a treacherous, winding path, fraught with palace intrigue, sibling rivalry, and the constant threat of a coup. As the 10th son of King David, Solomon was far from the obvious or expected heir. The principle of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherits, was not yet firmly established. His older half-brother, Adonijah, a man of charisma and ambition, certainly saw himself as the rightful successor. He began to gather allies, currying favor with influential figures in the military and the priesthood. You can almost feel the tension in the air of the palace, a court filled with hushed whispers and shadowy corridors, with secret pacts being forged over wine, with calculating eyes sizing up loyalties and weaknesses. Uncertainty was a palpable presence, a poison seeping into every corner of the kingdom's power structure. The succession crisis came to a head as King David lay old and frail upon his deathbed. Adonijah, seeing his opportunity, declared himself king, organizing a great feast and sacrifice to solidify his claim. It was a bold, preemptive move that nearly succeeded, but it took a dramatic, historic intervention to secure the future God had planned for Solomon. The prophet Nathan, a man who had never been afraid to speak truth to power, allied himself with Bathsheba. Together they went before the ailing king, reminding him of the sacred oath he had once sworn, the promise that Solomon, the son of his old age, the child of God's own choosing, would be the one to sit on the throne of Israel. Roused from his infirmity by the urgency of the moment, David acted with the decisiveness that had defined his reign. In a powerful, resonant decree that would echo through the annals of history, he declared unequivocally that Solomon was his chosen successor. He commanded Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah, the captain of his elite guard, to take Solomon, place him upon the king's own mule, a powerful symbol of royal authority, and anoint him as king before all the people. Try to imagine this scene. A young Solomon, perhaps still a teenager, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, is paraded through the streets of Jerusalem. The shofar horn sounds, and the people erupt in a deafening roar. Long live King Solomon! In an instant, the weight of an entire nation, a powerful and burgeoning empire, was placed squarely upon his young shoulders. The Bible records this momentous event in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 2, verse 12. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. But with great power comes the crushing weight of great responsibility. The final words of King David to his son were not gentle fatherly advice. They were a charge, a list of solemn and stressful missions. He commanded Solomon to deal decisively with old enemies who still posed a threat, to reward those who had remained loyal to the house of David, and above all, to walk in the ways of the Lord, to keep his statutes and commandments with all his heart and soul. It was a stormy and daunting beginning for the new king, a trial by fire from his very first day on the throne. The story of Solomon's ascension is a profound lesson in itself. It's a powerful testament to the mysterious ways of God's plan, which so often unfolds through the most unexpected and seemingly compromised of paths. A child born out of a scandalous and sinful union, not even the clear heir by birthright, was elevated by God to the absolute pinnacle of power. It serves as a timeless reminder that our origins, our pasts, the stains of our family history do not have the final say in defining our future when God intervenes. His grace can overwrite our circumstances, but with all of this incredible potential, with this divine promise hanging in the air, one cannot help but wonder, how would a king so young, so suddenly thrust into power, possibly manage the colossal burden placed upon him? What would he do with the magnificent yet complicated legacy his father had left behind? The answer to that question would not just define Solomon's reign, it would change the course of history forever. It was in a dream, a moment suspended between the earthly and the divine, that the true character of Solomon's reign was forged. At the high place in Gibeon, where the young king had gone to offer 1,000 burnt offerings, the Lord appeared to him in the dead of night. God's voice echoed in the landscape of his mind, presenting an offer of staggering magnitude. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. This is recorded in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 5. Imagine that, a blank check from the Almighty, a celestial carte blanche. What would you do in such a situation? What would you ask for? The defeat of all your enemies? Unimaginable wealth that would make kings weep with envy? A life so long it would span generations? Solomon, with the humble heart of a young man acutely aware of the immense task before him, chose none of these. He did not ask for power, riches, or longevity. Instead, his request revealed a depth of character that was truly astonishing. He said to God, "So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" He asked not for a gift for himself, but for a tool to better serve his people and honor his God. He asked for wisdom. This selfless and wise plea pleased the Lord so profoundly that he responded with an outpouring of grace that went far beyond the initial request. God said, "Since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings." Do you feel the sheer awe of that moment? It's a sublime choice, a request that reflected not only a deep-seated humility, but also a rare and profound understanding of what truly matters in leadership. But this incredible moment also raises a larger, more ominous question. Can a gift this extraordinary, this supernatural, truly be managed by a mere mortal? Or would this unprecedented blessing eventually become a gilded trap, a snare for the very soul of the one who received it? So how did this supreme, divinely granted wisdom manifest in the real world? The Bible gives us a vivid and unforgettable account that would become the quintessential story of Solomon's judgment. It's a story so famous it has permeated cultures across the world. Two women, both prostitutes, came before the king's throne in a state of desperate anguish. They had both recently given birth, but one of the infants had died in the night. Now they were locked in an irresolvable dispute, each vehemently claiming that the living child was hers. How could anyone possibly discern the truth? There were no witnesses, no evidence, just the raw, emotional testimony of two mothers. The courtroom was filled with a tense, breathless silence. In this moment of impossible conflict, Solomon, drawing upon his divine gift, issued a judgment so shocking, so seemingly brutal, that it must have sent a collective gasp through the entire palace. He called for a sword and declared, "Cut the living child in two, and give half to one and half to the other." It sounds barbaric, a solution of pure cruelty. But this was not an act of violence. It was a brilliant psychological test. The judgment was a scalpel designed to dissect their motivations and lay bare the truth of their hearts. The reaction was immediate and telling. One woman, the true mother, cried out in agony, her heart breaking at the thought of her child being harmed. "Please, my lord," she begged, "give her the living baby. Don't kill him." She was willing to give up her own child, to lose him forever, just to save his life. The other woman, however, her heart hardened by jealousy and loss, revealed her true nature. "Neither I nor you shall have him," she said coldly. "Cut him in two." In that instant, the truth was illuminated as if by a bolt of lightning. Solomon immediately pointed to the first woman and declared, "Give the living child to her. She is his mother." When all of Israel heard of the verdict the king had handed down, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice, as recorded in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 28. But Solomon's wisdom was not confined to the courtroom. He possessed a profound and encyclopedic understanding of the natural world. He could speak with authority on all manner of plant life, from the mighty cedars of Lebanon to the humble hyssop that grows out of a wall. He knew the secrets of beasts and birds, of reptiles and fish. He was a poet, a philosopher, a scientist, and a sage, all rolled into one. He composed an astonishing 3,000 proverbs, concise capsules of wisdom on life, morality, and human nature. He also wrote 1,005 songs, leaving behind a vast treasury of knowledge and art. that transcended his own time. His teachings on the complexities of life, the nature of humanity, and our relationship with our Creator are preserved for us in the biblical books of Proverbs, the deeply philosophical Ecclesiastes, and the beautiful, allegorical Song of Solomon. But let us remember a crucial distinction. Wisdom is not merely the accumulation of knowledge. True wisdom is the ability and the willingness to apply that knowledge in a righteous and God-honoring way. The extraordinary gift of wisdom that God bestowed upon Solomon was not meant for his own self-glorification. It was a sacred trust, a tool given to him for the purpose of serving God and leading his people with justice and compassion. It was meant to be a means, not an end in itself. This prompts a question for each of us to consider. What are we doing with the wisdom, the knowledge, and the talents we possess? Are we seeking to use them to serve ourselves, to build our own little kingdoms? Or are we striving to use them to serve others and to bring glory to God? It is a question that Solomon, at the height of his power, would begin to forget how to answer. Under the sagacious reign of King Solomon, the kingdom of Israel blossomed, entering an era of prosperity so spectacular it has become the stuff of legend. This was truly the land flowing with milk and honey, a place where, it was said, silver was considered as common as stones in the street and cedar as plentiful as the sycamore fig trees of the foothills. It was a period of such dazzling opulence that it is difficult for us to even comprehend. The Bible paints a vivid picture of this golden age in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 25. During Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, lived in safety, everyone under their own vine and under their own fig tree. This idyllic image represents perfect peace, security, and abundance for all. But this national prosperity did not happen by accident. It was the direct result of Solomon's brilliant leadership and administrative genius. He was not just a wise judge, he was a master organizer with incredible foresight. He divided the entire kingdom into 12 administrative districts, cleverly ignoring the old tribal boundaries to foster a new sense of national unity. Each district was responsible for providing provisions for the royal court for 1 month out of the year. This sophisticated system of logistics and taxation ensured a constant, steady flow of resources to the capital, while distributing the burden equitably across the entire populace. It was a masterstroke of governance that guaranteed stability and funded the king's ambitious projects. However, as we are so often reminded, immense wealth and unchecked power have a way of exacting a fearsome price. Solomon's monumental construction projects, including the legendary temple in Jerusalem, required an enormous labor force and astronomical resources. The endless influx of gold and the king's seemingly limitless power begin to raise uncomfortable questions. Was all of this breathtaking extravagance truly a part of God's plan? Or was it becoming a manifestation of a king's ambition spiraling beyond its intended limits? A monument not just to God, but to Solomon himself. Imagine a building so magnificent, so spiritually significant, that it would leave the entire world speechless. A sacred space destined to become the singular gravitational center of a nation's faith for centuries to come. This was the Temple of Jerusalem, Solomon's legendary masterpiece, a structure that represented an unprecedented peak in the history of both architecture and religion. But this temple was more than just an extraordinary building project. It was the physical embodiment of a dream, the unfulfilled, heartfelt desire of Solomon's father, King David. David, as a man of war, had been forbidden by God from building the temple himself. The sacred task was passed on to his son, the man of peace. In 1 Kings chapter 5, Solomon declares his intention. I purpose to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord said to David my father. The sheer scale of this undertaking is staggering. To accomplish this feat, Solomon instituted a national levy of labor. He conscripted 30,000 men from all over Israel, sending them to Lebanon into shifts of 10,000 a month. In addition to these, he employed 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stonecutters who worked in the mountains. This colossal workforce was overseen by a legion of 300 foremen. For 7 years, the sounds of industry were relentless. The clang of hammers, the groan of ropes, and the chiseling of stone echoed across Jerusalem, a constant testament to the grand project unfolding. Only the finest and most precious materials were deemed worthy of the house of the Lord. Enormous logs of fragrant cedar wood were floated down the coast from Lebanon. Massive stones were quarried and hewn with such perfect precision at the quarry that no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. The entire interior of the temple, the walls, the ceiling, was overlaid with pure gold. Even the floor was paved with gold. Can you even begin to visualize this level of breathtaking, almost suffocating luxury? At the very heart of the temple lay the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. It was a perfect cube, each side measuring about 30 feet, symbolizing the perfect and unchanging nature of God Himself. It was here in this most sacred space that the Ark of the Covenant, the very symbol of God's presence with His people, would be placed. Guarding the entrance to this inner sanctuary were 2 massive cherubim carved from olive wood and overlaid with gold, their wings stretching across the entire width of the room. In front of the temple stood 2 colossal bronze pillars, which Solomon named Jachin and Boaz, meaning he shall establish, and in him is strength. Powerful symbols of the stability and power that God alone provides. After 7 long years of relentless work, the magnificent structure was finally complete. The moment of its dedication was one of supreme sanctity and national expectation. Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes for a solemn festival. In a grand procession, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant into the temple and placed it within the most holy place. As the people prayed and offered countless sacrifices, something miraculous happened. The Bible recounts in 1 Kings chapter 8 that when the priests withdrew from the holy place, a cloud, the Shekinah glory of the Lord, filled the entire temple. The divine presence was so thick, so overwhelmingly powerful, that the priests could not even stand to perform their service. God Himself had come to inhabit the temple. It was a divine seal, a sacred confirmation that this great work, initiated by a king, had been accepted and consecrated by God. The Temple of Jerusalem stood gleaming under the Middle Eastern sun, a proud declaration of the greatness of God and the glory of His chosen people. And yet, even in this moment of supreme spiritual triumph, a haunting question lingers behind the splendor. Was God truly satisfied with this grand, external display of devotion? Or did He desire something deeper, something more internal, the humble and obedient hearts of His people? We can't help but wonder if Solomon, in his zeal, was building not just a symbol of his faith, but also, perhaps unintentionally, a monument to his own power and legacy. And now, with this architectural marvel complete, with his kingdom at its zenith, where would the journey of this great king lead him next? Picture a kingdom so wealthy, so powerful, so dazzling in its brilliance, that kings and queens from across the known world felt a compelling need to make the long and arduous journey just to witness its glory for themselves. This was Israel under the reign of Solomon. His fame for wisdom and wealth spread like wildfire, reaching the farthest corners of the ancient world. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings chapter 4, from all nations people came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. Jerusalem became a cosmopolitan hub, flooded with distinguished guests and foreign dignitaries. They arrived in great caravans, bearing lavish gifts: gold, silver, rare spices, precious stones, exotic animals, and priceless artifacts. But of all these state visits, none is more famous or more significant than the journey of the Queen of Sheba. She was a powerful and intelligent ruler from a distant land, likely modern-day Yemen or Ethiopia. Intrigued by the incredible reports she had heard, she came to Jerusalem with a vast and splendid entourage, bringing with her a fortune in spices, gold, and precious stones. But she came for more than just a diplomatic visit. She came to test Solomon, to probe the depths of his legendary wisdom with a series of hard, enigmatic questions and riddles. The result of their encounter was astonishing. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for him to explain to her. The queen was utterly overwhelmed. When she saw all the wisdom of Solomon, the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple, there was no more spirit left in her. She declared to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard." Solomon's personal wealth was, by any standard, beyond comprehension. The Bible records that in a single year, he received 666 talents of gold, which is roughly 25 tons. This did not even include the revenue from merchants, traders, and the tribute from vassal kings. During his reign, silver became so abundant in Jerusalem that it was considered to be of little value, as common as stones. The king's great throne was a masterpiece of opulence made of ivory and overlaid with the finest gold. It was a symbol not only of his immense power, but of a level of luxury that was simply unrivaled anywhere in the world. But Solomon's prosperity wasn't limited to material possessions. He was a masterful diplomat, forging strategic alliances with neighboring nations. His most notable partnership was with Hiram, the king of Tyre, a great Phoenician maritime power. Together they built a fleet of trading ships that sailed from the Red Sea port of Etzion-Geber. These ships, known as the ships of Tarshish, would embark on 3-year voyages, returning with gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Israel became the crossroads of international trade, a commercial powerhouse that attracted goods and wealth from far and wide. Alongside this burgeoning trade, Solomon continued his ambitious building programs. After completing the temple in 7 years, he spent an even longer period, 13 years, building his own magnificent royal palace. He also fortified major strategic cities like Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer, building store cities for his chariots and provisions. He even created a vast man-made forest in Lebanon to serve as a royal retreat. His military was also a formidable symbol of his power. He amassed a huge force of chariots and cavalry with stables for thousands of horses, demonstrating to the world that Israel was not merely a wealthy kingdom, but a dominant military power. But such breathtaking luxury and power are never without a dark side. Solomon's colossal projects demanded a constant supply of labor. The national levy that had built the temple was now made a permanent institution of forced labor, or corvée. 30,000 Israelites were continually sent to work in Lebanon, toiling in hard, grueling labor. The burden of this labor, combined with increasingly heavy taxes to support the lavish lifestyle of the court, began to sow seeds of deep-seated resentment and discontent among the populace. A fearsome question begins to emerge from the shadows of this golden age. Was Solomon, in the midst of all his splendor and success, beginning to forget the original source of his blessings? Was he becoming so intoxicated by the reflection of his own glory that he was forgetting that everything he had was a gift, a product of God's grace? The fame and fortune of Solomon present a powerful and contradictory lesson. The pinnacle of power brings with it tremendous blessings, but it also contains the latent, terrifying potential for a catastrophic fall. Solomon was beginning to transition from a king who served God to a king who was enthralled by his own ambition and splendor. At the zenith of his power, Solomon was more than just a king. He was a shrewd and pragmatic diplomat, However, that worldly wisdom, once his greatest asset, slowly began to morph into a dangerous double-edged sword. To secure his kingdom and forge unbreakable bonds with surrounding nations, he began to use marriage as a primary tool of foreign policy. The Bible records a staggering statistic that reveals the immense scale of these political entanglements. Solomon had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. These numbers are not just a testament to the complexity and extravagance of his court. They are a glaring red flag, signaling a profound and imminent spiritual danger. Among these countless political marriages, none was more significant at the time than his union with the daughter of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. This was a diplomatic coup of the highest order. For the first time in history, a king of Israel was treated as an equal by the mighty Egyptian empire. But what was the cost of this prestigious alliance? To please his Egyptian wife and his many other foreign spouses, Solomon built them their own palaces and allowed them to practice their native customs. Slowly but surely, foreign cultures and, more perilously, foreign religions began to seep into the very heart of Jerusalem, the holy city of God. These foreign wives did not arrive in Israel alone. They brought with them not only their wealth and their political alliances, but also their ancestral gods. They brought the idols of the Sidonians, the Moabites, the Ammonites, and others, dragging Solomon down a path of dangerous compromise and spiritual seduction. The man who had been blessed with unparalleled wisdom from God began to drift. The Bible records the tragic turning point in 1 Kings chapter 11. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. The man who once prayed for a discerning heart to lead God's people was now tolerating and then participating in the worship of pagan deities. He built high places, outdoor shrines for gods like Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and Molech, the horrific god of the Ammonites, to whom child sacrifices were sometimes made. He allowed, and perhaps even joined in, the very rituals and practices that the law of Moses had explicitly and vehemently forbidden. This was not merely an act of disobedience. It was a haunting, heartbreaking betrayal of the God who had appeared to him twice, the God who had given him everything. The fall of Solomon was not a sudden, dramatic event. It was a slow, insidious erosion of his soul. It was a death by 1,000 small compromises. Each small concession to his foreign wives, each prayer offered at a foreign altar, was another crack in the foundation of his loyalty to God. As his power, wealth, and international prestige grew, Solomon seemed to forget the source of his strength. He began to rely on his own wisdom, his own wealth, and his own political savvy, instead of seeking the guidance of the Lord. But God would not remain silent in the face of such betrayal. He had appeared to Solomon once in the dream at Gibeon, and the Bible says he appeared to him a second time, explicitly warning him about the dire consequences of turning away and worshiping other gods. Yet Solomon did not heed the warning, and so God delivered a terrifying and heartbreaking judgment. He told Solomon, "Since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem which I have chosen." These words sounded like a death knell for the glorious Solomonic dynasty. The consequences began to materialize almost immediately. Adversaries whom God had kept at bay during Solomon's years of faithfulness began to rise up. Hadad, an Edomite of royal blood, and Rezon, a Syrian leader, began to cause trouble on Israel's borders. But the most significant threat came from within. A man named Jeroboam, one of Solomon's own capable and ambitious officials, was met by the prophet Ahijah. The prophet took his own new cloak, tore it into 12 pieces, and gave 10 of them to Jeroboam, prophesying that he would become king over 10 of the tribes of Israel after Solomon's death. The kingdom that had once been defined by its glorious unity and prosperity was now teetering on the brink, threatened by internal dissent and external enemies. But the saddest part of this story is the spiritual legacy Solomon was now creating. The man who had built the magnificent temple to honor the one true God was now responsible for the proliferation of pagan shrines all over the land. The spiritual purity of the nation was being corrupted from the very top. The downfall of Solomon is a stark and chilling warning to us all. How could a man blessed with so much divine wisdom fall so far, so hard? It forces us to confront a difficult truth. Wisdom without the anchor of unwavering obedience is ultimately meaningless. It is a ship without a rudder, destined to be dashed upon the rocks of temptation. The final years of Solomon's life, a period that should have been a triumphant capstone to the golden age of Israel, were instead stained with the colors of darkness and decay. The king who had been revered throughout the world as the wisest of all men now stood as a figure of profound contradiction. He was a man who had stood on the highest pinnacle of human glory, only to fall into the deepest abyss of spiritual infidelity. And his fall would not just affect him personally, it would leave a legacy of catastrophic consequences for his entire nation for generations to come. God had explicitly warned Solomon, yet he continued down his perilous path of compromise. The pagan shrines to foreign gods, built to appease his many wives, continued to stand as monuments to his divided heart. His once fervent loyalty to the Lord became a faded, distant memory. And then the punishment that God had foretold began to materialize in earnest. Hostile forces, long held in check by God's favor, began to stir. From the outside, Hadad the Edomite and Rezon the Syrian became persistent thorns in Israel's side, raiding its borders and disrupting the peace and security that had long defined Solomon's reign. But the most potent threat was the one brewing from within. Jeroboam, the talented official whom Solomon himself had promoted, was now a fugitive in Egypt, secretly plotting and waiting for his moment. The moment foretold by the prophet Ahijah, when he would take control of the 10 northern tribes. Meanwhile, the murmurings of discontent among the common people grew into a roar of outrage. The heavy taxes, the years of forced labor to build Solomon's lavish and seemingly endless projects, the growing sense that the king had become a distant, opulent tyrant, all of this had caused the heart of the nation to grow cold and bitter. The social contract was broken. When Solomon finally died after a 40-year reign, the kingdom he left behind was a fractured and fragile entity, standing on the precipice of civil war. His son, Rehoboam, inherited the throne, but he inherited none of his father's wisdom or political acumen. Faced with the people's demand for a lighter burden, Rehoboam, on the advice of his young, arrogant counselors, foolishly chose to respond with threats and intimidation, promising to make their yoke even heavier. It was the final, fatal mistake. The 10 northern tribes, led by the returned Jeroboam, seceded, officially splitting the kingdom in two. What was once the glorious united kingdom of Israel was now divided into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The golden age was shattered. All the splendor that Solomon had built, the magnificent temple, the opulent palace, the vast treasuries, the international fame, was now overshadowed by the dark reality of a divided nation, a family at war with itself. Solomon's legacy is thus a story of painful but profound lessons. He showed the world that no one, no matter how wise, no matter how blessed, is immune to the seductive allure of temptation and pride. He demonstrated that wisdom without obedience to God and wealth without unwavering loyalty to Him ultimately lead to ruin. And yet, even within this tragedy, even in the ashes of his failure, the story of Solomon contains a persistent glimmer of hope. God, in his faithfulness, did not completely abandon the house of David. He kept his promise, preserving one tribe for Solomon's son for the sake of his servant David. The promise of a future Messiah who would come from the line of David remained intact. And the temple, though built by a man who would fall into apostasy, and though its sanctity was tarnished by his actions, remained the central focus of Israel's faith for centuries, a flawed but enduring symbol of the sacred covenant relationship between God and his people. So what do we, thousands of years later, learn from the spectacular and heartbreaking life of King Solomon? He reminds us that wisdom is not the final destination. It is a tool meant to be used in a life of humble obedience to God. He warns us that success and prosperity, when left unchecked by humility and accountability, can become a double-edged sword, leading to arrogance, moral compromise, and spiritual blindness. And above all, his life screams a timeless truth across the centuries. A heart that remains faithful and fully devoted to the Lord is the most precious treasure of all, worth more than all the gold of Ophir and all the wisdom of men. Solomon ended his life as a man of profound contradictions, a great king and a great failure, a testament to both the heights of human potential and the depths of human weakness. The question that his story poses to us today is a deeply personal one. Can we learn from his mistakes? Can we find the wisdom to use the intelligence, the talents, and the blessings God has given us, not to build our own monuments, but to live lives of faithful, meaningful service to him? Perhaps the greatest and most enduring lesson from the life of King Solomon is found in the words he himself is believed to have written late in his life in the book of Ecclesiastes, after he had experienced everything the world had to offer, after tasting all the wealth, fame, knowledge, and pleasure a man could ever desire. He came to a stark and sober conclusion. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. All of it, he realized, was like chasing after the wind, meaningless without a proper relationship with the Creator. And so he concludes his search for meaning with this final, definitive piece of wisdom. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. King Solomon remains one of history's most compelling figures, a man to be admired for his supernatural wisdom and to be learned from through his devastating mistakes. How does his story resonate with you? What aspect of his life, his wisdom, or his downfall impresses upon you or makes you think the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into one of history's most fascinating lives compelling, and you want to continue uncovering the profound stories that have shaped our world, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. You won't want to miss the journeys we have planned next.